Hey, everybody. You know what we got? It's Monday night. That means it's time to review The Bad Batch. We've got the latest episode number 14. It's called War-Mantle. It's got a lot of really cool stuff that I'm sure Daryl and I have a lot to talk about in this one. So, hey, let's get into it right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
Hey, everybody. I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for the show. So, man, this is actually a pretty cool episode. And once again, I kind of want to do the same thing like what we did on Fridays, just have a natural conversation. I actually thought that was cool.
Yeah. It's kind of like, our goes back to our roots, kind of how we started this whole podcast thing in the first place.
Yep, absolutely. So, I'd say, hey, man, let's just get right into this thing. So, this episode, to me, I have some complaints about it, which should come as to no shock to anybody. But I also have some really, really cool things that I loved about it. Namely, of course, we finally get to see what's eventually going to become the Stormtroopers in this episode. Finally, that bridge, because we had always wondered, what exactly? How are they going to transfer from the clone troopers to the Stormtroopers? And you could see the mindset was shifting in this episode, definitely. But and let me get that up here actually, because I have sort of a shot. But again, you somewhat saw the mindset of the clone troopers changing, and how they looked at some of the clone troopers that were still maybe not necessarily in love with the Empire, as they basically saw them as traitors. But you didn't really see armor-wise. And again, they don't have a whole lot of time to make this transition. So I thought that part was cool.
Yeah, the whole, transition from clone troopers to stormtroopers. Of course, that's, one of the big things, that we had to see in this series. We don't know how many seasons the Bad Batch is going to go, but I'm glad at least kind of started that process for us. Excuse me. So, I think this episode was cool. It didn't have the hype that I thought it was going to.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I saw the title War-Mantle, I'm thinking like, all right, it's about to really like be on a cracking, in this episode. But
right,
it was still kind of, cool. Much like yourself, I do have some complaints, but we'll get into those probably a little bit later. Overall, I thought it was a decent episode. I felt like this was a little bit more filler. Once again, it's kind of had that filler-ish vibe to it. But once again, it's still, like as we always say, it still continued the world building. Like I said, we got some of the things like we talked about the Stormtroopers. So it was a cool episode for me.
Yeah, and again, I think one of the, and we can get right into the complaints because this basically happens in the beginning of the episode. And I don't necessarily know, in the interest of just having our conversational, which is somewhat of a new approach that we want to do with these things, I don't know if we want to give an exact play-by-play of the entire episode. Right. Maybe just sort of go over the story pretty much like how we would talk to each other, more or less, right? But
yeah,
right.
This is assuming everybody's seen it, so.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a spoiler discussion, by the way. I know this is something that we totally neglect to talk about before a lot of our recent episodes. And we just get right into it. And, it's like, whoa, spoilery stuff right from the get-go. But yes, as a reminder that one of the things that we always do, the only time I think we ever do non-spoiler stuff is for the films. And maybe for like one of the TV shows or something, like, not like an animated thing, but maybe like The Mandalorian or something. But that's one of the reasons why we moved a lot of the reviews to Monday, because we used to do them on our Friday show, but it's like there's a lot of people that haven't been able to see them. So again, fair warning, this is a spoiler-heavy discussion. But this actually happens at the beginning of the episode. And it's, again, one of the complaints that I'm starting to have about this show is they've developed a little bit of a formula. And that is somebody reaches out to them for help. Hunter and the guys are a little reluctant. Omega's basically like, but no, we have to help them. And then Hunter, usually either on his own or maybe some of the other clones will or turn around and go, well, maybe we should. And then off they go. This is something that we've been seeing in episode after episode. And honestly, it's starting to get a little tiresome for me. What do you think?
No, I completely agree. That you're essentially allowing this kid to kind of like direct you guys. It's like, listen, like who's the parent here? And I feel like, in this particular situation, she's all like, oh, well, Rex said, and Rex said, it's like, well, you don't even know Rex. Well, she probably does know of Rex because
they
she
met
was
in
over
the
Camino.
previous episode.
Well, in the previous episode, but I'm saying like if that was her only encounter, like,
well,
what do you care? You see what I'm saying? But like, if you've known him at Camino, I could understand like, okay, like Rex is a hero, of course, in the whole Republic anyway. So she's been around the clones, all this time anyway. So I could understand why she may know him already, but nonetheless, I completely side with you on this one that this is becoming a bit of a habit that I really wish they would break, that this kid is kind of like leading the charge all of a sudden. I think that's kind of lazy writing.
Well, there is,
in my opinion,
there is because that actually, even though I wasn't really necessarily thinking of it in those terms, that is something that they've been doing in other elements of it. Every time that because at first I thought it was a good balance. There was the balance between letting her participate in everything, but at the same time protecting her. Because remember, this girl is basically being hunted here. She's not. It's not like she's just a companion. I mean, she's actually a target. And some of their caution is because of her inexperience. I won't even say it's because of her age, because a lot of cases, if she had been fighting with everybody for a long time, I think that wouldn't be a factor. But the fact that she's not experienced, she's not very knowledgeable about, say, the ways of the universe, and then add to that the fact that she's a target by the Empire, it's no wonder that Clone Force 99's like, listen, we got to keep you somewhat, hidden. But at the same time, they can't keep her inexperienced forever either. She has to get out there and do stuff and then basically learn, develop her skills that she obviously has. But I think that it's a balance, and I think that that's where the writing of the show was really good, is the fact for a long time they've been striking a really good balance between that. But my problem is that now it's becoming pretty much a predictable story arc, or at least a storytelling device that they overuse now, where they're reluctant to do it, she talks them into it, and then they go on the mission. Now, number one, I didn't even think about it from the angle that you're talking about, but you're right. I mean, it more or less puts her more in the leadership position. Yeah, and you got to wonder, well, who's running these guys here? Exactly. At some point, it's got to be kind of like, look, we said no. End of discussion.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, and, the beginning of it was interesting. You got another clone that's kind of being hunted, which I thought that was interesting. That was kind of a highlight because, seeing a regular clone just being hunted, it's like, all right. And then kind of seeing as the first when I first saw Rex, he kind of had like a Jedi vibe going on, like when he popped up on the hologram.
Oh, I know.
He got the hood on and everything like that. And I was just kind of like, who the heck is that talking to him? Like, oh, that's Rex. Wow. All right. But Rex kind of wanted them like, hey, I got a guy, And I honestly, I like you said, I wanted one of the other guys to kind of like say, "Hey, look, Rex bailed us out last time. Yeah, we owe him one.
Well, here's the
All right, let's
thing.
go get his boy."
And I just want
That
to
would have made more sense to me.
It would have. And it would have made sense in the context of, because again, this is one of the things I absolutely love about this show, is that on one hand, they cover topics like prejudice and things like that, right? Because now one of the things that's happened within the clone army itself is ever since the Empire took over, you now have these fractured groups. So you have the defective clones, which are basically our Bad Batch guys, and then you have what they would call the regs. And it was really one of the things that I thought was cool was it's kind of like, well, he's not really a reg. This guy's like a Republic commando. And it's okay, well, I guess that makes it a little bit better because it was dealing with why should we put our life on the line for just a regular clone? And I thought that was kind of cool. But again, that's where I think your point comes into play, where if one of the other guys, like maybe Tech or Echo or one of those guys, especially Echo, I would think would be the one who could best put this point forward. And that is, listen, Rex, he helped us. We owe him. We said we would be there for him. He wouldn't be asking. He knows the situation we're in. He wouldn't be asking if it wasn't necessary.
Dire.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so eventually they do take this mission. They're going to find this clone trooper Gregor, who's kind of like left this whole little beacon to kind of be found. So the Bad Batch kind of lands, finds the beacon, and then now they got to try to figure out like how the heck they're going to get into this whole like military installation that they got over there.
Well, there's a couple of things that I actually did, not much because we all know the time I have, but I did do an ounce of research on this one. Okay. The whole War-Mantle thing, right? That's that was also mentioned in Rogue One, by the way. Actually, I even have it here somewhere. But yeah, there's a bunch of really cool things about this episode where they reference other things, and that's something that I really like that they do, is that in a lot of these episodes, they're putting a ton of these little Easter eggs in. So again, this is a good example of this is what happens. They're rewarding the fans. Exactly. Yep. They're rewarding the hardcore fans. They're not making it too on the nose or obvious or obnoxious. So basically, if you're a casual fan or less, you wouldn't even know this was happening. Where meanwhile, the hardcore fans, even more hardcore than us in a lot of cases, their heads are just exploding because of some little thing they see in the background or a mention of something. And that was one of the things that I think you definitely saw.
Yeah. So that now they're trying to get into this military installation. They're trying to find this particular clone, and whose name is Gregor, by the way. And so he's going in, and they find him, and now they're like, okay, Rex sent us. And so he's like, oh, okay, cool. So now he's kind of joining the fight, and then as they're kind of moving around, and which always kind of gave me the reminiscence of them sneaking around like a Death Star. That's always what it gives me those vibes.
Yep.
But they noticed, one of the first things that they noticed was the armor is different. They're like, hey, this armor has got some upgrades to it, and I was like, well, yeah, the armor is upgraded, but the people in it aren't, upgraded. And that's when they realized,
what was a reference? What was a designation, like TK or something? It was like which would make sense. TK 421. Why aren't you
421?
Yeah. And they're like, what?
Instead of the CT.
Yeah, it's like, well, we've never heard of that before. What's that?
Yeah,
I thought that was cool. Like, wait, what division is this? Which to me is also funny too, because one of the things that happened, particularly when the prequels came out, is they started having a gazillion different classifications of stormtroopers all of a sudden, or clone troopers. That's when you started getting flame troopers and sand trooper and all these things. I mean, in the original trilogy, yeah, you had a few different stormtroopers, but it wasn't as crazy. And then you start playing games like Battlefront 2, and it's divided into all these different categories, and you're just like, and I think that was one of the things that was really funny, is that was almost a little reference. Like, well, wait a minute, what are these guys now?
Yeah, exactly. And then the fact that none of their clone stuff worked in there as well. Like when tech tried to, hack into the stuff, it's like, oh, well, none of these, none of my normal stuff that,
Yeah.
what I'm used to using doesn't work like the clone pad. And in fact, it triggered a whole alarm when they did it.
Well, and that's what I want to
So,
get to as well, because obviously, as this is going on, they had found Gregor and everything, and now they're trying to, once they get him, the couple of things
mhm,
that they find out, which I think are really cool, is number one, this is something that was actually, it goes back to the expanded universe, but the idea of clones training the stormtroopers, essentially,
mhm,
that was an idea that was, it had its hints back then. And so now they're canonizing that. But obviously, after the big battle ensues, and like you said, some of the tech they were trying to do wasn't working because codes were changed and everything else, which, makes sense. And it further isolates them because they're so used to being a part of this organization.
mhm.
And it's showing how different the Republic is from the Empire. And even though they're technically the same, they're not. And I thought it was great
Right.
that, like you said, they're trying to use all these standard codes or whatever, and they're finding out, well, wait a minute, this isn't working. Well, why isn't this working?
Yeah, they're always, like you said, just being pushed all the way out in every single area, and yeah, that was a good point that that you brought up, that Gregor was saying like, yeah, I trained these guys. He's like, because they made the reference like, well, I thought you trained these guys. He's like, well, I didn't teach them everything. He's like, that would just be stupid, you know.
Right.
So
Which I also thought was cool. But I think that
yeah,
part of that, too, and this is another thing that I think is cool, because I had heard rumors that they were going to try to explain why the stormtroopers weren't as great as shots or whatever. One of
hmm,
the things that I like, it was sort of implied with some of the dialogue, but it was definitely implied in the action. And that is, the Empire really doesn't care about accuracy anymore because they're just going to overwhelm everybody with numbers.
hmm,
And that's what you saw happening in this big battle, where the clones are obviously way more skilled. And
hmm.
the fact that they could take on so many and still survive is, quite frankly,
A
amazing and a
testament.
testament.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But as accurate as they are, and as much as they're using all this strategy and they're picking it off, they just find themselves being overwhelmed after wave after wave after wave of these new troopers. And
Hmm.
you're starting to get a little bit of a hint into what the Empire's strategy is.
Yeah.
And that is, if you got a line of
Sheer
like,
volume.
1,000 guys and you just got laser fire everywhere, you don't necessarily have to be the most accurate, because you're going to hit something.
Hmm.
And you're just going to basically overwhelm them. And I thought that was a really, really cool thing. And again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier, that, you know, even though you were more or less calling this a filler episode, which, by the way, I totally agree. I don't know if it's so much a filler episode in the sense of, like you said, it does still do some world building and things like this, but it certainly does not live up to what we thought we were going to get in an episode called War-Mantle.
Correct. Definitely. And of course, once again, we're still seeing the absence of Crosshair. Like, okay, I understand, like the last episode, okay, we needed a break because the episode prior to that one, it's like, all right, we just came down from this big high. So as you brought up, dynamics. But now it's like, okay, we're like, this is the third to last episode, this season. So of course, now the next two episodes we are expecting definitely, to see some action with Crosshair coming back into the whole situation. But yeah, it's a filler episode in a way. But like I said, it's still kind of like I said before, it definitely builds that world because you're answering a lot of questions. You're answering the questions about the clone troopers, and as far as how they're getting pushed out, now we're getting replaced by the stormtroopers. You just brought up the point of, the Empire's strategy now is like, okay, we'll just overload you with just sheer volume and force that you couldn't even do anything, even if you were skilled. Just
Mm-hmm.
the amount of people, that you have is just insurmountable. So I think that's really cool. And then as we kind of, delve a little bit further into this episode, one, we see Omega once again being kind of impatient kid. Like, look, what if they need us? We should be doing something. We should be helping. And, Records is like, just chill, relax. They got it,
Well, and the funny thing
Um,
is that Wrecker was used more in this episode for comic relief.
yeah, he definitely was
He,
from the outset.
yeah, like from the very beginning. I noticed that was one of the things that was really different than some of the other. He
Hmm.
would always crack a joke or two or have somewhat of a
Yeah.
funny thing, but I mean, he was really more so to just provide that comedy element
Hmm.
into this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that too. And I was kind of disappointed because I actually wanted to see like Record get at these clones. I mean, not the
I
clones, but the
know the
stormtroopers. Just
stormtroopers.
because I just wanted to see how he would just massacre those guys. But,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we'll see that later, but, um, just watching them, how they, with, just even how they were thinking, as far as like, okay, they'll never think to go through this exhaust, they went through this whole exhaust vent or whatever to try to escape, and they were like, all right, we'll just get to the top. And but like you said, just the sheer volume of them was just kind of like, overwhelming. And just like, man, this is kind of heavy. you know but we're also starting to find out, on the more administrative side of things,
Yes.
that was the big thing that we got out of this, is on the administrative side of things, um with our good old admiral. um we're starting to figure out, like, okay, now he's completely turned on the Kaminoans, or the
Yep.
Kaminoans. I guess that's how you pronounce it. But so that
Yeah.
was kind of a thing.
I was really surprised by that whole scene. I mean, first of all, before he even shows up, because Rampart shows up kind of toward the end of that conversation. What I did think was
Hmm.
cool, and I'm thinking it's going to set up some more. They're going to, I think, even start to set up more beyond uh, Return of the Jedi, because now I think you're going to get a little bit of an insight as to the cloning with Snoke. Um, with some of the other things that we've seen, especially where Grogu is concerned, right? Because, they want a little bit of his blood, so they can probably make clones off of him. But it was when both Lama Su and then Nala Se,
Now let's say, yep.
yeah, when they were talking, they basically were outlining a plan of like, okay, well, you know what? The Empire doesn't seem to be interested anymore. Let's maybe try to take this somewhere else. And then, of course, they're going, yeah, but the only problem with that is I don't think that. See, this is where the Empire's not like the Republic. They're not going to just let us go off and find other customers because they're not interested. It's more like, you know what?
Hmm.
We don't really think you're necessary, which means this whole thing's going to cease to exist, kind of a thing. But it does leave it open that maybe this is where some of that other stuff comes from, which again is why I say this is a really huge world building episode, because even though it had a very fillerish kind of delivery to it, there's definitely a lot of key components that you have. I mean, this is how the Empire is going to vanquish its enemies, through overwhelming force. This is how
Hmm.
the clone troopers transition to stormtroopers. This is how the whole cloning thing is going to start to take shape. So you are seeing some very key elements, I think, into this whole thing. They just did it in kind of a filler-esque way.
Yeah, definitely. I like the fact that Lamasu and Nalase, but like, look, let's just get some of our medical people. Let's get all the essential folks that we need. We can start this
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Time to
Like,
bail.
they already kind of, yeah, they already peep game. They're like, yeah,
Yeah,
this
this
is
isn't going to
not
end
going.
well for us. We better get out
Yeah,
of here.
I feel like they're gonna turn on us real quick, and no sooner than they can.
Yep.
Admiral Rampart pretty much comes in. It's just like, you know, I have use for a medical, or I mean like a
A
medical
scientist.
scientist. Yeah, but a politician, I do not.
Yeah,
And
which
then
was a total
you just
thing
know.
because he thought, what was funny was Lama Su probably thought that he can cover, right? That she was the one that was in trouble. And so he was like, okay, well, I'll punish her and all this other stuff. And he's just
Hmm.
basically like, no, you're not really getting this, buddy. See, we have
Yeah.
use for her. So we're going to
Yeah.
overlook this. You're the one.
Yeah, exactly.
Which of course happened in a lot of changing regimes and stuff like that, where an outgoing regime or maybe some organization that was maybe doing business with that regime suddenly finds themselves on opposite ends. You see a very similar thing playing out. And these people that thought they had the proverbial get out of jail free cards are suddenly finding they're going to be on the wrong end of, in this case, a blaster probably. Because even though they weren't really specific about it, I mean, you got the feeling that they killed him, right?
Oh yeah, I mean that's definitely
Yeah,
the case. I mean, anytime you leave two guards in there by themselves, you shut the door. I mean, it's a kid's show, so you can't really just show them just gunning the person
right,
down,
right,
but
right. Yeah,
or
you can't.
executing them. But you
That's
get
true.
it.
That's true. But hey, it's one of those things where it makes me wonder if they did that because they wanted to leave the door a little open. But I did think that it was amazing because Lama Su is a pretty main character, at least in the Star Wars universe. I mean, granted, he's not like Han Solo or something, but
Well, yeah, prequels, yeah, but in the prequels, yeah, I mean, they were,
he's a guy, and he's
he was a prime
lasted.
minister.
Clone Wars,
I mean, yeah.
all this stuff. Like he's been a prominent guy. So I was
yeah.
really shocked. I'm like, man, they're not kidding. They're not playing around. Which I thought was actually a really cool thing, by the way.
I kind of wish I would have saw Tarkin deliver that order, though. That would have been cooler.
That would have been cool. Yeah.
It's like I don't have I don't have room for a politician, and then just turns like he walks out, and you just kind of know because you know how Tarkin is. Tarkin is shrewd, man. Tarkin doesn't care,
No.
But Admiral Rampart, though, he's kind of shown that like he's kind of shown he could be kind of cutthroat and ruthless himself.
He's kind of Tarkin-esque.
Yeah.
He kind of reminds me of a combination of Tarkin and I keep forgetting the guy's name.
He reminds me of Callus.
That's who I'm thinking of. Callus.
Oh, Callus, yeah.
Yeah, who eventually becomes Fulcrum before Ahsoka does. But yeah, exactly. He kind of reminds me of like he's rooted in Callus, but he's got some definite Tarkin-esque qualities to him. I guess would be the best way that I can pretty much put that.
Yeah, like Tarkin is his mentor or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really cool that they did that. Now the ending of the thing, because again, they do go in and then they capture Hunter because Hunter basically commands them like, okay, they're being overwhelmed. When we come back to basically what's going on with the Bad Batch, Hunter ends up falling, gets separated, which, by the way, him surviving that fall was very impressive to me.
Exactly. Yeah,
I mean, I think under
nasty.
most circumstances, that would not have ended well for people. But yeah, he survives. Right. And then, of course, he gets captured. He orders the other guys to go away. And I think that that's a really cool thing, too, because it definitely teaches Omega something. Because, of course, once again, she was being her and saying, no, we can't leave him behind and all this other stuff. And it's like she's impressed upon, and I think she needs to learn the greater truth here, that sometimes in order to basically preserve the greater good, you sometimes have to do a little less than desirable thing, like leave your guy behind.
Yeah, you got to make the sacrifice.
Sure, because if they had tried to go back for him, they all would have probably been killed. And he knew that. And then it gets to basically the end of the episode where, see, the ending of the episode is kind of how I wanted the episode to be.
To start?
Yes.
Yeah. There you go, huh?
Yes.
Exactly. So we finally get Crosshair popping up.
Get Crosshair popping up.
Yep, Hunter's like, I was wondering if you were going to show up, and they kind of has like, well, I was hoping to have the whole team, but I guess you'll do for now. You know,
Yeah, now before we get
so
to
you got to
that,
kind of wonder what that is.
our buddy Dwight is chatting in.
Yes,
Talking about
yeah, the white.
the hunter's helmet being well, and I would actually by the way, Joanne's with us as well. I would actually extend that to all of his armor. I wouldn't just say his helmet. I mean, I think
Well,
we could
yeah,
agree that
yeah,
armor
that
was pretty
fall from
good.
the height.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
he's hitting stuff. It kind of reminded me of the Titanic movie where they're hitting like propellers on the way down, and you're just like, okay.
Oh,
It's like, well, maybe.
yeah,
Oh no, not that one. Just it's
exactly.
kind of like
Like if
the
you weren't dead by the
you
time you
know
hit the water, you
right. It's kind of like they'll bounce on one or two things. You're like, okay, well maybe. Well, all right, maybe. Nope, that one did it.
yep,
And
yep, that was it.
that was the one. That was the death blow right there. And there was a couple of those that I thought with Hunter as well. Like, well, okay, but like, oh no, that was
Yeah,
bad.
you
But
just sit here. I'm like, that hurts. Yeah, but I think this, I mean, it perfectly sets up like 15 the episodes for 15 and 16 now, because we know we have to deal with Crosshair, so we know like
yes,
not 15 is going to deal with, okay, we got to go get back, we got to go get Hunter back. How are we going to break him out? And now it's putting Omega kind of in risk with, being exposed now because now you don't have Hunter to tell her like, no, stay on the ship. She's gonna, of course, Omega's gonna want to go help. So I'm interested
I'm
to
really
see how this is
wondering.
gonna play out.
I know because see, to me, this whole thing would have made more sense if it were the last episode. Because I'm guessing number one that the last episode is going to be maybe a double thing. But even if it isn't, it's like, what are they going to do for this next one, 15, versus what they're going to do for 16? Now, what they could do, this is my thoughts, and then I'll turn it over to you and let you give yours. And then, of course, we'll also turn it off to anybody that's watching. And then I'll also turn it over to anybody that's watching the rebroadcast. But my thinking is they might actually wrap up some of the Crosshair stuff in 15. Whether or not he either stays as a villain or if they get the inhibitor chip out, because frankly, that's all they have to do. They just have to somehow knock the guy out, get the inhibitor chip out, and then he's normal. Maybe. He might have been too far gone where this stuff is into his regular consciousness, so maybe even taking the inhibitor chip might not work. But it really doesn't matter for this scenario because I think that they can wrap up the whole Crosshair storyline, and then in episode 16, you can take us to maybe Omega's thing and a little bit about what the Empire is going to do more or less in the universe and setting up a season 2 perhaps. Now, what do you think?
I'm pretty much roughly along the same lines. I think they're going to drag 15 out. I think 15 is going to be like one of those, almost like a two-parter thing. Like, okay, we're going to start it in 15, but we're going to finish it in 16.
Okay, that's
and
possible.
Maybe they may do something where like maybe halfway through 16, Crosshair is redeemed, so to speak, where he comes back to the batch, or he could stay a villain. We don't know. But I think at the very end of 16, Omega is going to get caught. And then that's how we're going to we're going to be left in that suspense and have to wait all this time until season 2 to come to find out like, okay, how the Bad Batch is going to retrieve Omega.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that really makes me interested because there's a few things I'm wondering. Number one, so she is Jango Fett's other unaltered clone. Mm-hmm. It kind of makes you wonder if at any point Boba Fett's going to show up and be interested in all this.
Possibly.
Because you could see that being of interest to him.
But I don't think he will even be, that would be even on his radar though.
Well, while you're thinking of that, Dwight definitely agrees that I don't think Omega's arc will be tied off in season 1. Yeah, definitely not. Crosshairs maybe, but not Omegas.
Yeah. She's too pivotal of a character now.
Too
And with this
pivotal.
building,
Not to mention the fact that they've been building her story a lot slower, which
mhm,
indicates to me that it's almost again, her
you
character
gotta do
mirrors
something with her.
Grogu in a lot of ways. I mean, besides the obvious age difference, but their fate is along the same lines. They're both targets, they're both kids, they're both, you know,
Mhm.
just the kind of the
And,
dynamic between
and they both possess something that the a
that the
whole
Empire wants.
regime
Exactly.
wants. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? Yeah,
They had the
exactly.
father figure, one's got Hunter, one's got Din. I mean, there's a lot of parallels between those two characters. And I think
Definitely.
another parallel is going to wind up being that, yeah, you're going to see another season of the Omega story arc. Now, Dwight also adds, I agree, Eric, regarding the Boba tie-in. Just why I think she continues in season 2. Yeah, now, let me... Oh, wait, now he poses a question. Do you guys think the whole batch makes it out of season 1?
Yes. Well, by the batch, you mean the original, like
Yeah. Well, yeah.
without, I mean, minus Crosshair.
Right,
Yes.
right.
I think they will. I think they're going to retrieve Hunter at some point, but I think like that's what's going to happen in the midst of retrieving Hunter or something or other. Omega gets herself captured, and then now the batch has to kind of regroup, and now that sets up season 2 and goes after her.
Yeah, because, they could do a couple of different things here, right? Like, number one, they could actually have Crosshair go back to the batch, back to being,
Hmm.
for lack of a
A
better
member of
term,
the
a good
team.
guy. Yeah, part of the team. And and again, this may be another somewhat overused story arc, or trope, but you could have it to where now that Crosshair has a little bit of inside information on how the Empire is working and all that stuff, they can use that to tell some interesting stories, I think, for season 2. And certainly to help Omega, and again, it doesn't matter. And as far as the Boba thing goes, even that, it could go either way. And really, the story arc survives no matter what you do. I think that if you added Boba in there, it would be interesting, and certainly it would be yet another thing that keeps him on the Empire's radar, because obviously it seems like Boba Fett is somebody that, if he's not regularly used by the Empire, he's certainly on their radar all the time. And
Yeah, but he is the best bounty hunter in the galaxy at that point.
sure, and that could be the extent of it. That could be the only reason why they go to him. But it also makes me wonder, though, if him continually popping up maybe keeps them refreshing their memory too. It's kind of like if he's coming in, because it just makes sense to me that if Omega is another unaltered clone, essentially being Boba Fett's sister, you would think that he would want to take a look and see what that's all about. Now, of course, he may not even know that's the case, but they could do something in season 2, or frankly, even in episode 16 of 1, that Boba finds out about her.
Now, the only way I can see that happening, is this, because we know how Boba. If you want to play that Boba Fett card, right? How do you introduce him to where it makes sense to him finding out that Omega's his sister? The way you do that is because, one, right, we already seen Fennec Shan go after Omega. We've seen Cad Bane go after Omega. So now they're like, all right, you know what? We're about to get the best bounty hunter. We're about to get Boba
Exactly.
Fett to go after. And then now Boba Fett goes after, and then as he goes after, he finds out like, hey, wait a minute. You're
The only
different.
thing is, it would really depend, because on one hand, remember that Fennec was hired by Nala Se.
Now say.
So she doesn't necessarily, and I don't think that anybody from Camino, at least anybody that's involved in the cloning technology, I don't necessarily know if they want to stir that hornet's nest. You know what I mean? Where
Well,
you
that's
bring
what I'm saying.
Boba
I
Fett
think they're
in? Why would
gone.
they? Huh?
No, they're gone. So that's what I'm saying. Like, so I'm trying to remember. Wasn't
But
it Lama Su who went after who got Cad Bane?
yes. So now
Right.
you have the two
So
people in play that are not. See, that's the
in play
thing. It's
anymore.
like I think that Omega was really wanted more by them than the Empire. I mean, we keep saying
Well,
the Empire, but
yeah,
that may or may not
that's
prove to be
you're
true
right.
because they're not really necessarily. It's them. Omega was the key
Yeah,
to their plan.
you're right. You're absolutely right.
Now, what could happen is sort of like maybe a little bit of undercover thing here. Now, let's say being a scientist in the Empire, she might still want to get Omega back for some whatever. Well,
To
her
still
whole
enact
thing
their
was to
plan.
protect her. So the problem is, and remember, one of her last lines was like, "Look, as long as she's with the Bad Batch, I'm good." It was Lama Su that kept sending all these people because he had a more nefarious purpose for her. Now, let's say it was just trying to protect her. So I
Right.
don't. In talking all this stuff out, it's actually kind of funny because now I don't even necessarily know if Omega's a target anymore. Unless somebody else finds out. Dwight also says, true, Crosshair had them fire on Omega. Yeah, right. So the Empire obviously didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
So it is going to be
Well,
interesting.
yeah, because they don't care about clones anyway because they're switching to troopers now, so
Right. Because
they have
again,
no need.
this is we always want to say Kaminoans, but Kaminoans, was that how you were
Kaminoans.
saying that you're
Yeah,
supposed to
the
say this now?
Kaminoans. Yes, the Kaminoans.
The K's. They don't necessarily care. They're the ones that really were more into Omega. They don't necessarily care about a lot of this war stuff except for how they can profit from it.
Right.
They were the ones that had Omega was part of some big giant scheme that they had that they thought was going to make them more valuable to the Empire once again. And what
Because she still had Django's original. She's the original, like Boba was.
Right. Which I think
So
is
they figured they could
hilarious.
probably make more clones or make better clones now.
Yeah.
Like Rex and all those guys.
Now, here's the thing. On one hand, I think it's comical that they spent all this money on all these bounty hunters to try to get her back, and now the Empire doesn't even care about them. They've moved on from clones. So it's almost like even if you went up to the Empire and say, hey, guess what? We've got an original template or something, they'd be like, okay. So all this time and energy they've used to do this, right? They don't even care anymore about it.
Well, yeah, that's why they were doing it before, because they were racing against time, because they feel like, okay, the Empire is going to move on to something else. We don't want to lose. This is our biggest client, so we're not trying to lose this. But they figured, like, okay, if we can get Omega back, we can still develop clones for somebody else. And I think that's why Admiral Rampart wanted them. Well, he wanted to, of course, acquire Namasei and kill Lama Su. It's like, I feel like I'm doing a Michael Jackson song, like Mama Say, Mama Sama Makusai.
Exactly. Thought you were going to break into want to be starting something pretty soon.
but the thing is that, like, it makes sense because, like, if you can create a whole army out of genetic material, that's useful to the Empire, like you said, for Snoke and all that other type of stuff and all the things that the Emperor might want to do. But you don't want to risk them going somewhere else and creating another army that can then now rise up against your Empire. Mm-hmm. So that's why he had him killed.
Mm-hmm. Which is terrible now, because in my head I've been going like, now let's say Lamasuna now. Like, their names actually work. That's what, if you just get one more of those guys, get one more of them, that can cover the third little word, and you can basically replace that little part of wanna be starting something with Kaminoan names, which is kind of useless to probably most people out there, but hey, why not, right? But yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, is the fact that, and now you're bringing it up to now, I think it's going to be really interesting, because this is where things are kind of breaking off from some of the other source material that we've seen, is the fact that nobody really cares about Omega at this point. So
Hmm.
a couple of things have to happen if they want to keep her as maybe one of the people of interest to some sort of either a rival organization or something like that. But to have her in danger, if they want to keep that going, they'd have to do one of two things. Either they would have to figure out both what Lama Su was actually planning, and then if they've determined, how far maybe he got into that plan, or maybe if they saw another use for it, because remember, the Empire, Palpatine is still very much interested in cloning.
Hmm.
So if he finds it out, okay, they might not care about cloning as far as, hey, we want to make a bunch of soldiers, but he might be thinking, hey, this could actually, maybe I could use this for something.
Well, the other thing too is you have to, remember we always said that each one of the Bad Batch has their own special gifts, and now we kind of find out what Omega's is. So that could be very useful as a stretch strategist.
Sure,
That's very useful to the
sure,
Empire.
absolutely. Especially with some of these other, now you bring in like the Chiss and all these other things. Obviously, Palpatine wants to keep a lot of these people at bay. He would need a good strategist. The other possibility, again, as I just bring up Boba Fett, is the fact that somehow he finds out about her, and then
Hmm.
he might decide, I either need to bring this person to my side, or I might have to eliminate her because she could be a threat to me, because she possesses Jango's DNA. That's another route they could go.
Yeah, that's true. I
Now, of course,
think,
we don't really know which one they're going to do, and they might not do either one of them.
yeah, that's a high possibility as well.
You know what would
But I
be
think,
really
what do you think?
cool? Well, go ahead.
What do you think the Empire is going to do in season 2? That's the big question. Because, like, okay, now that we're starting to see them transfer out, or we're transitioning between clone troopers to stormtroopers, what do you think is the next big move for them? Because, see, I think where we're going to start, for me, well, I'll let you give your answer first, then I'll come back to mine. So, what do you think in season 2,
That's very deflective.
possibly? Oh,
But, I mean, we can go there. It's fine. Well, we know around this time the Death Star is still a big deal. I mean, if you
Mhm.
think about it, really, between episodes 3 and 4, the Death Star was the primary thing they were doing. And I'm not saying it's the only thing they were doing, but it was number one. They were putting a lot of resources toward it. They were putting a lot of their best people on it. This was a thing. As far as any other extracurricular type stuff, maybe we could start seeing what Crimson Dawn's doing and how that's coming into this whole thing, because obviously that's brought up in Solo, which is, I'm not sure how much time is going to transpire between season 1 and 2, and I'm also not sure exactly how far they're going to take this. So, like, if they do, let's say, 4 or 5 seasons, which seems to be Filoni's average, if they do 4 or 5 seasons, conceivably it could start getting a little bit closer, if not overlapping Solo. And now you have all these criminal gangs. You have the Hutts, which of course we've already dealt with. You have Crimson Dawn. They're actually bringing Black Sun into it. So, you could see maybe a bunch of these kinds of things either providing some complications for the Empire, or you could even see something as far as, okay, the Death Star is their main thing, but we get to see a little bit more about how they're subjugating worlds. And pretty much, because that's one thing that we haven't really seen outside of the novels, is how they're going to all these different planets and
Getting
pretty
control.
much, getting control of them. We could also see a little bit more maybe of the rebellion, so it's kind of open.
Yeah, that's what I was going with it. I was going to say, I think we're going to see more of their quest for acquiring worlds, and these worlds trying to find, the Bad Batch to kind of like bail them out of stuff. But I think what we're going to see also is that their involvement with the budding rebellion. I think that's really going to be kind of a focus because, like I said, Rex was always talking about, he's got some things he's cooking up, and we last saw Rex in this last episode. He was in the middle of this whole firefight that he couldn't even. He was almost like pulled a Maz Kanata. It's like, all right,
Yeah, I
look,
thought of
I
that too.
gotta go. you know, so I think that we're going to see the Bad Batch kind of reestablished with Rex. I think we might see some, Mon Mothma, some.
Oh, so you cheated, man.
What?
Cause when you
What?
presented this question to me, you said, "What's the Empire gonna do for this next season?" That's why I
Well, yeah,
focus
that's
on
what.
them. Hey, you're
Well,
all
that's what I
talking
did. I mean,
about what
like,
the rebellion's doing, and
well, I mean, the Empire, but that's what I'm saying. Like, the Empire is going to be kind of like the reason why I was talking about the rebellion, because I think that's when they're starting to actually deal with the Empire now. I think this is where they're starting to kind of
well,
create
kind of. But if you
some
remember,
havoc.
though, well, yes and no. I mean, really, it was Rebels that really started to, I guess, depict the Rebels really getting going, because before that, it was seen as just like these individual terrorist groups attacks. It wasn't even really anything unified. And then if you really want to get hyper technical, it was the Battle of Scarif that really totally united the rebellion, is what we know.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's why I said the budding rebellion, because
Well, okay.
in the beginning, because we saw Gerrera,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
his whole and Tarkin was trying to get them. He was like, "Look, wipe these guys out," and he couldn't. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, I think we're going to start seeing those little
Some of the
groups
seeds.
like this. Yeah, the seeds of the rebellion start to form, and then now that sets up, it makes Rebels make more sense. And then, of course, because now like I said, we've already saw Hera. You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying? So
Yeah. Well,
that's what I mean.
obviously they're trying to make this a little bit of a prequel to Rebels. In
Right.
fact, I would honestly say that what this show is going to wind up being is probably the bridge between Clone Wars and Rebels. Clone Wars and Rebels is very much like episode 3 and 4 in a way,
Right.
where because they're both actually being told, and if you just like shifted the timeline over, that's basically the same amount of distance almost. So that's probably what they're trying to do. Let me get this comment of Dwight in here. They still have a batch of clones that were being taken off Camino early in the episode. And that, yeah, I noticed that. I
I
did
wonder what they're
notice
going to
that.
do with him. Do they just kill him or something? Or
Well, that's it. See,
just
part
blow
of
him
the
up or
thing,
something?
and this is where I think that maybe this is why they're going to have 2 additional episodes instead of just 1. Because if you look at the way this thing ended, this could have been episode 15 if you're just dealing with the whole Crosshair storyline, and maybe Omega. But the fact that this is the second from the second to last, so in other words, like you said, third from last, so you have 2 more episodes to go, it does lead me to believe that maybe they're going to address one of the other critical things that they absolutely have to address in this series at some point. Not in season 1, somewhere during the run of the show, they have to show exactly what you brought up. What's going to happen to all these clones? You had this whole army of clones. Now, a lot of them transitioned over to basically the Empire, but as we can see, the Empire's trying to phase them out. They're trying to basically use these new recruits, these people that are loyal to the Empire. So they have the problem of, what do we do with all these well-armed, really skilled clone troopers that are on our side, that are actually in our employ right now? And then there's a bunch of them, like Rex, like some of these other ones, that just basically left and decided to live a normal life. So you do have to go into, I think, at some point during the run of the show, what happened to all these guys? And maybe we're going to start to see the seeds of that over the next couple of episodes.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, like you, I'm really looking forward to these
Season
next
2
2
already?
episodes. Yeah, because it blows my mind as far as exactly how much they almost seem like they have to cram into these next few. You know, almost like
I mean,
what do you
they got loose ends. They definitely have a lot of loose ends to tie up.
Right. That's basically it. Exactly. They got a ton of loose ends they have to tie up. So it's really going to make me wonder what they're going to do. And I, for one, can't wait to see it. Just like I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do in season 2. Although I've learned, now that we've had enough of these Star Wars shows come out, I've learned that, okay, when the current season's done, you know, I'm really, really restless for the first week or two afterwards. But then I start to chill out. And it used to take me a lot longer to do that. Because, you know, let's face it, after that whole Luke Skywalker season finale of The Mandalorian, you're really... And now they got that whole poster out that's showing Luke and Grogu. It's like for season, you know... I think
3.
it's a season 3 poster. So you're kind of... Now you're... This... And this is probably something that we should do an episode on soon, where it's like, well, where is season 3 really going to go now? I mean, we've basically talked about... We've actually had a couple episodes where we talked about that. But now, this kind of spins things around a little bit. Because we assumed that when Luke took Grogu, that was going to tie up the Grogu storyline, and now Din was free to maybe do the whole Mandalore thing with Bo-Katan, or maybe go after Moff Gideon, or a whole plethora of different things that they've already set up. But now it makes you wonder. And it's the same thing with the Bad Batch. It really makes you wonder what direction they're going to go in, because even if they somewhat tie up these couple of storylines, there's still a bunch of things that they've introduced that they haven't really addressed yet. So, yeah, I'm really curious.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right, but the question is, what about you guys? How curious are you? You know, we've chatted a little bit with some people, and, you know, obviously you're probably watching the rebroadcast of this thing. So, first of all, hit that like button, because it really does help our channel when you guys hit the like button. The YouTube algorithm really likes it. We like it. Makes us feel good to see all those likes. So make sure you hit the like button. And if you actually are really liking a lot of the shows that we do and everything that we're covering, consider hitting the subscribe button too. So that way you guys will be up on all the latest shows that we do. We go live every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And we'll either do reviews or sometimes we talk about a bunch of different topics. It's just basically a fun Star Wars discussion show. So you guys aren't going to want to miss it. We don't know what we're going to talk about Friday yet. We could do the ever-elusive High Republic issue number 6 comic that we keep threatening to do. But, you know, I don't know. First of all,
It might be.
well, I have to say a little note about that before we go. Is the fact that it was originally said that was going to be a 6-issue comic. And now I just got number 7 a week or so ago. So it's like, okay. I'm going to have to read up on that, because the whole reason why I started these reviews of these comics was like, okay, I thought that maybe we could do this little series and the next, kind of like what Darth Vader was doing. But I think that this run is going to last a little longer than I anticipated. So I thought that was funny. But either way, hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Definitely tune in this Friday when we talk about either the High Republic or something. But we'll be here Friday night at 8. And of course, let us know what you guys thought of the War-Mantle episode of The Bad Batch. And where do you think they're going to go from here? You know, we'd really like to know. Leave your comment in the comments section. So with that, I think we're going to say goodnight to everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.